we don't need to do that again, but this is, like you said, our first editorial board interview, and we're talking with the candidates for the 23rd District House seat. And I want to give you each just an opportunity to introduce yourselves, and I think we'll let Christine start since you're the incumbent.
I knew you were going to do that.
Well.
So good afternoon. Thank you for having us here today. I'm Christine Rolfes. I represent the 23rd Legislative District in the State House, and I'm in my second term, so I've been representing the area for 3.5 years. And I hit the ground running, I would say, in 2007, mostly with the support of the people in our district. My first term, we passed some pretty groundbreaking ferry reform legislation, but more importantly, I led a charge in the legislature and outside of Olympia to form a broader coalition of legislators and community leaders who were concerned about the ferry system and the long-term viability of the ferries. And that paid off in my second term in the 2009-2010 legislative session, where we were able to pretty much save the ferry system in the middle of one of the worst economic recessions the state has had. And where last April or March, we were able to put in place some changes to the laws so that we could get better control over operating costs. And a lot of that work will continue through the summer, and I'm hopeful we'll have some good legislative proposals to put forward in September or October to address some of the ferry concerns that a lot of us have had. I also, in my first term, jump-started led a bill to get passenger-only ferry service off the ground in Kingston by allowing ports to operate that service. And this past year I was able to get funding to help subsidize the operating costs of that ferry system in its initial phases. So I've been on the Transportation Committee and working on these transportation issues the whole time I've been in the legislature. But a lot of the really good policies that we work on in Olympia actually come from the people that live in our districts. And I've had a really rewarding experience and a lot of fun actually working with people from Kitsap County to get laws passed. One of the ones that I'm most proud of came from the Veterans Advisory Board, the county's advisory board. And we worked together and last year changed the definition of veteran in the state for county assistance purposes to include the National Guard and Armed Forces reservists who are coming back from serving overseas, to allow them the same access that other veterans have historically had to county services. I also worked with Mothers Against Drunk Driving and a couple of leaders in that community in Kitsap County to change the law so that crime victims would have a role in Department of Corrections decisions about work release programs. So people who were the actual victims or the family members of victims would have some control over where the perpetrator was being placed in the community. I also worked with the Silverdale PUD, and we got some groundbreaking legislation passed to allow water districts to do reclaimed water projects, which is a big issue in this state. We expanded mental health services. We saved the Francis Haddon Morgan Center. We expanded training opportunities and educational opportunities at Olympic College over in the peninsula. And we eased the transitions for military families for their kids when their kids are transferred from school district to school district, not just in the state but throughout the country. So I see you looking at me, David. The last 2 years have been really tough. They've been really tough for the families, for businesses, and for the state legislators. We have almost 300,000 people unemployed right now in the state, almost 1 million people without health insurance. And in that climate, we had to make really tough decisions about taxes, about cutting spending, and about laying off thousands of employees. So I've tried to take a very thoughtful, deliberative, and balanced approach to the decisions that I make. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, I'll cut you off in because I'm certain we'll talk about that. Jim, go ahead.
Okay, my name is James Olsen, and I've been a resident of Bainbridge Island since 1990. Prior to that, a property owner during the 70s for several years. I am not a career politician. I cannot sit here and recite what I've done over the past two sessions or prior work to that, say in Bainbridge City Council. I cannot tell you that. However, what I do bring is I bring a unique set of skills in that I think are in demand. I spent 30 years in the military, retired as a captain, 06, Coast Guard Reserve. I had assignments up and down the West Coast. I've been back at the Pentagon, had an assignment at the Pentagon, had special assignments working for the Commandant. I provided some information to each of you. The viewers can't see it, but there are several personal military commendations I received. 3 commendation medals and 1 meritorious service medal. And they chronicle, the medal itself you don't see, they're impressive. But if you read the narrative, you'll see some of the work that I had to do. And I had to do with a large, complex military federal agency and having demanding things that they had to do. And I sought difficult assignments, was given difficult assignments, and somebody thought I did a good job and gave me commendations accordingly. But some of the things that I had to do for the Coast Guard had to do with streamlining. This was back when we had Vice President Gore, and he had a government improvement, GIPRA, I don't recall the acronym right now. But the reduction and efficiencies in the government, well, the Department of Transportation, and the Coast Guard is one of them, took that very seriously. And they basically re-racked all their districts, all their organizations, vetted every position, and sought efficiencies to no end. I was the project officer working for Admiral Lockwood here in the District 13, and that was discussed there. I also was assigned down to the MLC Pacific in terms of the logistics command. I filled in for the commanding officer down there, the 2-star. That was another assignment I had. So, retired from the military, had experience, I have good people skills, I understand complex organizations, I understand about being efficient. Okay, on my civilian side, since 1976, I've built with my wife a real estate investment firm with multi-million-dollar holdings, provide affordable housing in Kitsap and King County. I know what it means to run a business. I know the absolutely toxic environment there. So I have private business experience. I'm a businessman. I'm a proven businessman. But the backdrop is we have the biggest business we have here in the state is the growth in government. We'll go into this more detail. But government is the only growth business we have going right now. It's oppressive. People are about fit to be tied with what's going on. They don't like it. There's basically almost insurrection, and this is on the national level, this is on the state level, the county level. The city of Bainbridge is bankrupt, virtually bankrupt. The only reason the big spenders there can't spend is they have no money. I'm here as a tonic to that. I'm a simple man. I want efficiencies. I know how to say no. I know how to say yes. I know how to work with people. The Democratic Party has a hegemony on city, local, and county government. And they're basically driving us into the ground, creating a business environment that's terrible for employment, terrible for our kids. Thanks.
Aaron.
I'm Aaron Winters, and I have just working experience as a foreman for Aspen Tree Expert Company. I left there. I went to a construction site on the Elwha River project to a sediment clarification plant to be used during the removal of the dams on the river. And so I'm just a working person that is now displaced. I'm unemployed. And I am fed up with government growing into our lives. And we have tax cuts that add costs. That makes no real sense to me, to have a cut to cause increases. We always talk about at work, if you can make a change, you have to step up to the plate. And that's what I'm doing. I'm stepping up to the plate to take on a challenge. I've been researching what I can as fast and as hard as I can since signing up to run for office, and I'm trying to gain as much knowledge as I can in a short amount of time.
You ever run for office before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You live in Paulsville?
Paulsville, correct.
How long have you been in the area?
34 years, 33 years. That's
I'm sorry, you
basically
didn't
it.
catch up.
I just want to change our area for the better.
The first question I wanted to ask, because I think it's the biggest issue in the state, and this is kind of what Christine ended her comment with, is the state budget and the financial kind of outlooks that are coming up. There was a report last week, within the last week and a half, but there may be another 200 million short of what was kind of projected, and then a possible $3 billion in the next biennium that they could come up short again. I'm going to let James start with this question. The state has already cut, and I won't even quote the number, but considerably in the last two sessions they've had, it's been almost all cuts. How is the state going to continue to do that? If you're down there, what do you look for first as far as trimming budgets to make that balance again?
Okay, yeah, I'll answer your question in a second. David, how long do we have? What are you looking for?
Try to keep it as brief as we can, so we can keep moving through questions. Take
Sure.
a couple minutes. I'm not going to put
Sure.
it on a strict time limit, and we may go
this
back.
is a doctoral thesis. Yeah. What to cut and the budget cuts that have gone on. Is that the thrust of it? Yeah. Yeah. We're really in a pickle. We really are in a pickle, and it doesn't take the informed voter knows. The citizen knows. There was a bit of a flim-flam that went on. The state was clear that they were going to be having some shortfalls, and they proposed to get themselves out of that predicament. They were going to come up with a tax increases that were various implemented. But there was a prohibition on that. They had to have a 2/3 majority. No problem. You declare emergency, and then you go ahead and you work into the solution they came up with. Okay, so you say it's an emergency, you bring about, you got a green light for a tax increase. Additionally, I just love this one. So how do they balance the budget, Ms. Rolfes and the Democrats down there? The way they do it is they tax the kids candy. That's wonderful, okay? So tax the kids candy. Then what you want to do is you want to save people from bottled water. So tax the bottled water. And then to round it out, go after the poor man drinking Budweiser or whatever beer they drink, but not a microbrew. Tax those people. So now it ends up they're still going to come up short. Did the legislature say there was an emergency and go to the unions and say crack open those contracts? We want more concessions. They did not do that. So if they've got more shortfall coming, what they need to do is to go at, not go after, that's the wrong word, to ask the various unions to pay their fair share. They're paying 88 cents on a dollar is picked up by the state as far as their compensation package goes for health care. 12 cents they pay. Let's make that 75-25. Let's privatize some businesses. Let's do the printing. Let's take a look at the ferry service and privatize some of that, the prison systems. There are a variety of things that can be done rather than going to the easiest option saying, oh, the devil forced me to do it. We're going to raise your taxes again.
Say, Aaron, same question.
Same question. I would go with listening to the people. If these initiatives pass that state that the people want to privatize liquor, shut down the liquor stores that are state-run. I'm sure we pay leases on those. I'm sure we don't own the property they sit on. That's unnecessary waste. We don't need to waste money. We need to keep the money. We need to balance the budget to come up with a 98% use, a 2% savings for all future use. I drove here. There's a project going on our Highway 3 out here. Seems like a pretty good road to me. It's not the worst in the state, but we're profiling it and repaving it. That's waste to me. That money could have been used elsewhere to fix a bridge that's dilapidating, roads falling into the water. We have rocks and I-90 fall on the freeway. There's other concerns that could be addressed with that DOT budget. The people don't necessarily have to be displaced to work, but they might have to move to work in our state, somewhere else, to a different region, or commute. I try to think local, and you sit there and you're just like, wow, why are we spending money on this stuff? Is it necessary? We put money into big, beautiful buildings. Back when I was a kid and back in World War II, you know, they built stuff that was simple and practical. It was not ornate. It was not glorified to be beautiful. It was functional. It served a purpose, and that was it. And I think if we restrained ourselves from over expenditures, I think it'd be easy to come back into a budget that's doable.
Christine, what's your outlook for the next session?
Well, I have the same budget numbers that you just portrayed, and so it's clearly going to be another difficult budget year. Clearly, the last 2 years we closed a $9 billion gap in the state budget. We also reduced spending by about $3 billion in 2009. So we've been working with about $12 billion in reduced spending in 2009 and 2010. We made about $4 billion in pure cuts. And those are the cuts that you see, you read about in the newspaper or see on TV, the cuts to the school districts, the cuts, we took 60,000 people off of state health care, cuts to criminal justice, cuts all across the board. The natural resource agencies were cut about 25 to 30%, so Department of Ecology, Department of Natural Resources, state parks, they got hammered in the last state budget. We reduced spending $4 for every tax that we raised in that tax package that just passed. In the last tax package, we closed about $200 million in loopholes that had been identified in a previous study that had been done that identified billions and billions of dollars in tax exemptions that the legislature should look at. This year we were able to agree on roughly 200 million of those. The rest of the tax package was a lot of the taxes that these guys have talked about. Bottled water, the candy, the gum, the beer, the soda. And we made most of those taxes temporary, hoping that when the economy got better, they could go away. What we're going to cut next, I don't know. What we are doing right now, those of us who are working in the interim, are all working on a variety of different projects that will hopefully continue to work on streamlining government or finding efficiency. Some of the biggest cost savings are probably in information technology, where we're really not collectivizing to some extent the way that the IT departments are run in different agencies. There's different silos all over the place, and there's probably $1 billion spent on computer database kinds of things in this state. So we're working right now on how to streamline that, make it work better for the public, make it more cost effective, and if it's not going to meet certain criteria, we don't invest in it next year. So that's one place. I've been working really hard because I serve on the Transportation Committee on the transportation budget. So we had some successes with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge last year. We've had some successes with the ferry system and saving money and cutting back on capital expenditures. Some of the things that people think are too extravagant today. We don't need grand new ferry terminals. We need new boats that get people across the Sound. On the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, we changed the way you do toll the state collects toll violations. So instead of going to court, it's administrative. That'll save us a few $1 million a year, hopefully, and will allow us to keep the tolls steady or more stable. So those are the kinds of things that every member of the legislature right now is working on. A few million here, a few million there, 100 million here, 100 million there. It's not going to get us to $3 billion. We're probably going to have to continue to take make cuts. This year we laid off in the last 2 years, we've laid off about 4,000 people, or reduced 4,000 jobs, I should say. A lot of that was retirement. We'll probably need to continue doing that. But there's a balancing act, and that's part of the challenge of being in the legislature. There's a balancing act. How far do you cut? How far do you raise taxes? What's the balance so that the state legislature isn't spiraling the state down? So even in the last economic numbers that we saw in this county, part of the newly unemployed were 100 state workers that lost their jobs due to state budget cuts. And that's fair. We don't have the money to keep spending, but those are people who are unemployed, maybe looking for health insurance, and there are not jobs right now to take up that slack. So it's a real balancing act, and I try to approach it with a rational, reasonable framework, and I certainly hear from a diverse group of people on how the money should be spent.
What about the question of going to unions? Are there concessions that should be requested? Is that something that's going to come up?
It probably,
if reelected,
yeah.
Is it something you would try to address?
I think the contracts are open this summer. I think that, but I have to look at that.
What types of things would you be interested in talking?
Well, some of the things that we've already done. For example, the cost of living cost of living allowances were frozen across all state jobs. An initiative had been passed to give teachers a guaranteed cost of living allowance or an increase in salaries, and we froze that initiative as well because no state employees were getting their COLAs. So that's an initiative that was passed that we also temporarily suspended during this recession. We put in place a furlough policy, so rather than opening up the contracts and cutting salaries, we allowed departments to figure out how they were going to reach targeted reductions, and furloughs was one way to go about it. And so I don't know if you've done that in your businesses. A lot of people have, where you take a day off and you don't get paid for it, but you're not doing more work and not getting paid for it. That's something we've done in the legislature with our staff over the last year. It worked, and so we've asked the other departments to all look at it. And then healthcare benefits. I think there's two ways of reducing healthcare costs, and the way that our healthcare authority went about it this year may not be the way we keep it. It may not be the policy we keep in place. But what we agreed to was the employees all had their premiums upped a little bit. But more importantly,
do you know what a little bit means?
I actually know the dollar amount, but maybe from 90% to I don't know. I will have to know that. But what we did more importantly was internally the employees are handling more of their costs. So there's a higher copay when you go to the doctor. There's a higher prescription drug copay or payments. So the way that we went about trying to reduce the healthcare expenditures was putting more responsibility on individual employees, which is a theory for how you reduce healthcare costs in the greater system.
Okay.
So we sort of put that into play.
If you're elected to the seat, do you see things that haven't been addressed? Things that are mentioned there, what you could approach, and all that.
A couple of things Ms. Rolfes was talking about. When she talks about temporary taxes.
Oh no! I guess we can go back. We'll get to the tax question.
No, I don't mean rebuttal. Ask again, David.
The question was, when we're talking about, and you brought this up in your opening statement, if you were going to go to employee unions to try to find more savings,
yep.
What are some of the things that should be targeted or should be at least on the table to discuss with them?
Well, I think certainly manning, the size of the workforce. Ms. Rolfe has mentioned some reductions, some fig leaf reductions in the amount of state workers. There really isn't. If you take a look over a period of time, the amount of how the state workforce has grown, they may be able to cite over this last time, we had a furlough or let go 100 people, but the overall trend is not getting smaller, it's getting larger. And this is not, again, I'm not running for county office and I'm not running for the City of Bainbridge office, but it's the same story. The City of Bainbridge was overmanned by 30% at $3 million a year. They're broke. A little plug for Bainbridge here. But that goes on at the state level too. The issue about the liquor sales that Mr. Winters mentioned, that's a great one, where they want to still stay in that business. DSHS is a gigantic agency, unmanageable. We're basically getting taken to the woodshed by the lawyers having to do with egregious things going on. Perhaps some of that can be privatized and handled by non-government workers, like Catholic Community Services. That's several areas. The prisons, maybe we can take the prisons, get a partnership with the state and privatize some of the prisons. I don't mean the justice part of it. I mean the sitting in prison kind of, what that costs. There are a variety of things that are going. The unions have a lockhold down in Olympia. And there was and when our fearless governor won her re-election against Mr. Rossi, there was a very significant rainy day fund surplus that we had. And one of the things that he was running on, didn't prevail, was that he was going to be tight-fisted and watch that rainy day fund and not spend it down. Okay? He lost. To the winner go the spoils. Well, the spoils went to the unions. A lot of the supporters of Christine Gregoire were rewarded handsomely with increases and what it was they want. That's got to stop. We can talk about furlough or pay people for 5 days, but they do 4 days of work. It's like a shell game. We need to have, as I had to do with the Coast Guard, we have to be right-sized, manned by the right number of people, not an ideal number of people, not a number of people where we've got people sitting on the caboose, doing something that makes no sense whatsoever. So that's how we have to get to it. The Washington State Department of Transportation, another monster agency, as Mr. Winters was pointing out, doing all these various beautification programs. I love beauty. We can't afford beauty. Fill the potholes. Do the essential things. That's the only way we're going to get down there. And it's not going to be making friends with the unions and kind of like England and their austerity budgets that they're having to go through. There's some hard times. Going to have to tighten the belt. Everybody can't be happy. We can't afford unlimited money for the arts. We're not ancient Rome bringing tribute in from all over the Aegean.
Okay. Aaron, I'll bring you back to the other question. When, if you were elected, when we're talking about employee costs and union costs, what do you approach first? Or is that a place to cut? I guess that's it.
I don't have all the information on that stuff, but I would. From my experience in my union, when I called to file a grievance, I got terminated within 2 hours. And the business rep called me up and said, "Hey, where you at?" I go, "I'm sitting at home." He goes, "Did you get your termination papers?" I go, "No, I'll get those sent to you." So unions and I, we're not the closest of friends. So, because it's amazing, But then the guy smoking marijuana over here, he gets to go to work after he failed the drug test. That's how the union worked for me. So my benefit was a little bit harsh with them. And yet I'm still a member, so I just was there for a paycheck, I guess. And I look at it as like, what can we consolidate in our state to cut costs? Sometimes these entities are triple what they need to be. You have paperwork going here, 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 when it could be just done right there in the first one. There's no reason to have this organization take care of this. Or why can't we privatize? Some outside businesses can do it more efficiently, cheaper, and better.
What sorts of things? Give me examples of. Jim already had a couple.
Well, I would say, as she pointed out, the information technology stuff. There's plenty of contractors out there that do information technology work, and I'm sure they would love the opportunity to take on a whole state account and figure out how to make it better and more conductive or conducive to what the people need. I can only think of this position is what the people want. And the people aren't getting what they want, because when they vote, It's not passed through legislation. They just deny. And we had a stimulus package granted to our state. I don't know the whole rules of all that, but to me, why couldn't we hold that and keep that and take care of some of the deficits we have? You know, we have to just cut it all loose.
I think that was the stimulus. It's stimulating the economy. It's intended to be spent.
Right, but if we
That's the
took
point.
care of our debts, wouldn't we be able to provide a better balance or better budget for the next session?
Well, they do balance the budget every year. I mean, that's what the legislature
Right, but it's over.
ends up doing.
It's already over. It's projected to be over. And we're not getting a stimulus this year, perhaps. I mean, it's out there that, oh gosh, we might get a stimulus, but we don't have it yet. You can't count your chickens before they hatch.
I want to give Christine a chance, since both of you had a chance to address what sorts of things could be privatized. Is there anything that you would like to look at as well?
Well, I'm not. We fought privatizing the ferry system a little bit on the floor of the House this spring, and I don't think that's an idea that I would I don't think that's a good way to look for cost savings at this point. I'm hesitant to look at privatizing the prison system. I think we're pretty lucky in the state to not have the prison industrial complex constantly lobbying and pushing for higher prison terms. Our citizens are strong enough in that. We have done a lot of work, and I will support continuing to do work within, say, DSHS, Department of Social and Health Services, having more private agencies helping with the foster care system, helping to screen families, helping to place them and rewarding them when they are successful. Same with home health care agencies. The state doesn't provide home health care service. We contract out for those kinds of services to keep people in their homes longer. We've done a lot of work in the last year to streamline and privatize and make more efficient those aspects of DSHS that we felt were okay to hand over to the private sector. There's immense liability issues with taking in foster children or serving work release prisoners or work release people. So there's a legal balancing act when you're talking about privatizing, and there's a cost benefit that you need to go through. Is it really cheaper for the private sector to do this job? And will the public be better served by the private sector doing the job?
Back on? Okay. Let's have a tax question, because you mentioned a few times that one of the measures enacted to balance the budget last year was to put the tax on the bottled water and the cigarettes and the beer. It was a temporary tax installed, but there's also, at the same time as people started talking about our tax structure in this state, there was some discussion of an income tax. I'd like to know if that's something, if elected, are you at all interested in having that conversation? Do we need to have that conversation as a state? Or is that something that needs to be put away for good, and how should taxes be addressed if that's not part of the equation?
Okay, I would put it away for good. We don't want an income tax in the state. I mean, the people, obviously, they voted for Initiative 960. They didn't want that tax, and they got it. We are sending a message saying we don't want these taxes put on us, and we're not getting that back. We're going, well, too bad. It's all on you. And I would not go for an income tax at all, and I don't think the people of District 23 would go for an income tax at all. I mean, I know a lot of retired people that just seek out states to license their motorhomes and everything so they can avoid paying income tax. And I would be truly against it. And the other taxes I would work to repeal. I would go to vote for yes on the 2/3 majority voting. Again, that's an important thing. You should not have a 50+1 vote. It needs to be a majority. You need a majority. And 50 plus 1 is a majority, yes, but it's not the group of people in your district that vote for things. They're not for that.
Well, the proposal, it was an interesting one. On my way out the door, my wife read it. I might have been in your paper yesterday or a couple of days ago. And it's a very interesting one. The Faustian bargain is, we gouge the rich. We put this new tax on the rich, but property taxes will go down. So what they do is they turn to the unwashed masses to say, yeah, that's right. I can throw my rich friend, you know, the guy down there in the big house on the waterfront on Bainbridge, under the bus, have him pay more taxes, and I'll get my lower property taxes. Okay? Well, it's the head of the camel in the tent. Once it gets in there, it's like all other taxes. Ms. Rolfes has referred to before about temporary taxes. Yeah, wink, wink, nod, nod. They're not temporary. They have tremendous staying power. Taxes, once they get in, they have a vested interest. And as my good friend here to the left talked about, notwithstanding the will of the people, saying car tabs, $30, and next thing you know, they're $90. They're back up there again. Or 2/3 vote, you know, on tax increases, and next thing you have the legislature doing a switch and bait, saying it's an emergency, and next thing you know, is they're raising taxes again. So, to the question about an income tax, well, they can, as long as the Democrats are down there, they will talk about an income tax. Hopefully, the Republican majority in this next go-around, because of the ire of voters and taxpayers all over the state, will give more staying power and more horsepower to the Republicans to stop nonsense about discussion about income tax. The answer is not on how we're going to get more tax. It's not an issue of money in, it's spending out. Take care of the other issues like we've been talking about, having to do with getting the unions to pay their fair share, privatizing, and on the issue of private, yeah, there's a liability with the DHS as you privatize it if private agencies do it. Well, I noticed the state managed to get the heck suit out of them, and they were in the driver's seat. So I'm not saying that we have nobody there, but certainly the state isn't handling their own part of the liability thing. So, no income tax, and it's a spending issue, and it's a manning issue. That's what needs to be brought into control.
I think that the most interesting part of that ballot initiative, and whether they'll have enough signatures that we get to vote on it is still up in the air. The most interesting part of that really is the B&O tax exemptions for small business. And my opinion, my belief is that the way that we're going to grow the state out of the recession is by promoting small businesses and entrepreneurs in this state. And certainly lowering the taxes that they pay to the state would only be helpful. So I think that's one of the best parts of that whole proposal, and it's one that nobody's really talking about for various reasons. I also wanted to say something about the tax loopholes that we were able to close. There were billions and billions that we could have gone after. And you just couldn't muster 50 votes for a lot of them. But we couldn't close any of those tax loopholes, any of those exemptions on the out-of-state banks, on some of the really large agribusiness companies that were exploiting some tax loopholes in the state. We couldn't have done any of that without suspending that initiative, because the initiative said, the lawyer said that tax loopholes equal taxes and you can't close them. So there were compelling reasons to take another look at that initiative. And that's what I will say about that.
Judy, do you have a question? I would keep going, but...
Just a question about, Mr. Winters mentioned Initiative 960 that you supported the suspension of a little while ago. I was just wondering what you would want to say to the people who voted 2/3 to put that in, regarding that being potentially a precursor to more taxes.
That was an initiative, like a number of other initiatives, and voting to overturn that or to temporarily suspend it, but it's essentially the same thing for the way that it worked this year, was probably one of the most difficult votes I've taken. And I've certainly heard from people who were outraged and angry about that. A couple of things to say about that. One is I already spoke about the tax exemptions, and I think that that was fair. And I think a lot of times we vote for initiatives and we count on the legislature to make sure that what's passed is lawful and to make changes if necessary. And that was certainly, I think that was an unintended consequence. Was that I don't think people knew that that meant you couldn't close loopholes or close exemptions. The voters in the 23rd did not support that initiative, and that wasn't really a compelling reason to vote to suspend it, but it did tell me that a majority of the voters that I represent count on me to use my judgment and to work thoughtfully when I'm in Olympia. So that was, that was an issue that I took into account. And the third one really was the basic where the rubber hits the road when you're making the spending cuts and you're looking at an economy that's on the decline. You're looking at businesses that are struggling, people that have lost their jobs, a huge number of people who are relying on the state, on the broader community to support their schools, to support their kids, to help them in the hospital, to help their parents in the nursing homes. When you have people that are on the edge the way we've had over the last year or two, it becomes almost a moral decision. Do we raise taxes on candy or bottled water, or do we cut more people off of health care? And those are the kinds of decisions that people trust us to make. And if we make it the right way, we keep our job, and if we don't, we have more fun with our family.
Let's go this way and then finish with you on the same, your reaction to 960 or any statement you'd like to make.
When it was turned against us, when it passed, I was disappointed. I felt that the people of the state made it clear. May not have been everybody in our district, but the majority of the state voted. We don't want this, and if we don't want it, that's a pretty loud voice, because we're all supposed to work as a team in there to do what's right for our district and then the whole state as a whole. And if we're not able to work together to pass this stuff, bipartisan, cross party lines, we don't have to go. I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote with all my colleagues. We don't have to vote like that. We can vote for what's right for the people and what benefits us all.
Okay.
Well, just a point that Ms. Rolfes made there a second ago. She talked about the quandary that she says that she had to wrestle with, if I heard it correctly, was either you cut people off the either you suspend 960, or you have to cut people off the state rolls or give them hardship that they're not fit to handle given our toxic economic times. Okay, back to the point I made earlier. Cut spending, cut manning. There's another choice. They got this sort of either or, that if either if I, the nanny state, do not take care of you and suspend this thing, you're up the river. No, they're in the driver's seat. The Democrats control a majority down there. If they can't, through working with the minority, the Republicans, muster a majority for fiduciary matters, they got a real problem. But instead what they did is they cracked it open, said it was an emergency, we don't need it. Okay, what do the voters do? It's one of the initiatives. I can't give you the number. I'll get a little more versed in this as I get into the campaign, saying, give us the 2/3. What didn't you understand about that? This is why the poor Tim Eyman is always going to be in business, because the legislature and all their genius think the people are totally stupid. They can't write an initiative, or they don't know what they vote. So he has to do it over and over again. People are fed up with government, the growth in government, and the spending of government. They want people to be taken care of, but not by government. Let the private sector do a large part of that. Back to the spending issue. It's like the Full Retention Act for government.
Can I ask a question?
Can I say something?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
I want to reiterate something. And the first is, in 2009, we were faced with these same kinds of challenges, and we worked under the initiative, and we reduced spending by $9 billion. We cut about $3 billion in spending. There was no opportunity to have a bipartisan approach to this, because one party came to the table and said, we're not going to support overturning an initiative, and we're not going to support raising taxes. Good luck, Democrats, you're in charge. There was no opportunity for bipartisanship, and all of us want people to work across the aisle, but that's a very strong tenet of the Republican Party, and they were not going to give on that. And so it was left to the majority to figure out how to move the state forward. So I appreciate the desire to be bipartisan, but on that particular issue, we vote together 80% of the time in Olympia, but on that particular issue, there was no chance to be bipartisan. It was really up to 61, 62 House members and a majority of senators to figure out the direction to go in.
Karen.
Why do you think the voters are angry? What do you think is propelling the interest in a huge change in our political structure right now?
I can tell you why I'm angry. I think
you represent voters.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that it depends on the voter that you talk to. So, for example, there are people that are mad about property taxes still. There are people who have lost their work and they're mad at immigrants. There are people who lost millions in the mortgage upheaval and they're mad at the banks and the federal government. There's a huge range, there's a huge diversity of reasons that different people are angry about different things. So I think we're angry because we're in a bad situation and we're all trying to get out of it, and there are a lot of opinions on the best way to go about that. I think that's where we are, and you could trace it to the federal government, you could trace it to the legislature, you could trace it to bad decisions at the local level. You can trace it back to employment situations. There's a whole range of reasons.
Why do you think they're mad? Why are you running?
Well, I'm running to help solve what I'm about to explain as to why the voters are angry. I'm not a career politician. I don't plan on making a living out of this. I'm willing to step forward and do it. And anyway, I'm willing to do it. But I'm not planning on being a career politician. We have too many career politicians. The 23rd Legislative District has career politicians that are basically homesteading and are planning on basically locking this up for the indefinite future. So people are tired with career politicians. They're tired with the growth in government. Ms. Rolfes talks again about cutting back, making these really hand-wrenching decisions about how they're going to balance the budget and here and that. Taken over a period of time, the only growth industry that we've had in the state of Washington is government workers and the paycheck that government workers have. And I realize that includes the federal government. We have our fine military here.
Okay, what about the software industry?
About using the software industry as a part of the way, or the fact that they had problems? What do you, David, about the software industry?
I've always understood that to be one of the biggest growth industry in the state.
Well, I mean, there was the high tech, that bubble sort of burst. We still have that. The military is a very big factor here in this district. And I'll put a little plug in. I got a son who's a pilot in Afghanistan, an Army pilot, and he serves with wonderful people over there. So anyway, but we have the military, we have the Navy here, we have the Army, we have Fort Lewis in the state. That's really important. So I don't mean to go after that part of the government. Back to your question. We have the growth in taxes. We've talked about this a bit. I'm not going to beat that horse again. But there's always a new tax. We've seen it. You just pay it. I mean, you've seen the commercials for it. From the coffee you buy, this and that. Another Kitsap Regional Library is going to float another one. The school boards are going to float one. Bainbridge wants a tech levy. Bainbridge wants a new senior center. Inefficiencies in government. Again, we've talked about that. DSHS, Washington Department of Transportation, the IT department. There's a fact that in this state, locally too, we have a hegemony. It's a Democratic hegemony. And they've got a lockhold on what gets passed and as far as their position with the unions. I'm not bashing the unions. It may sound like I'm not. But we've got to have some balance in there. A lot of people are not in unions and are watching their wages. I'm a businessman. I've watched my bottom line get worse and worse as the taxes have increased. It's very difficult to make ends meet. And no, it's not George Bush's fault. I hear the overall overlay. Generally, my good liberal friends on Bainbridge Island, whenever you consult about what's going on, they say, oh, George Bush caused all this to happen. No, it's not. You're still my good friend, but you're not the one who told me that. Anyway, we got a bloated government. That's why people are angry. They're watching. They're scared. They've watched their retirements. They've watched their house decrease in value. We'll see if the taxes come down. We've got a gagged up real estate market. So that's why people. There's the Tea Party. Tax, whatever, I forget what they're acronym for, but basically it revolves in large part around taxes. And as far as the party in control, you can dismiss them, but watch out.
Same. Can you repeat it?
Why do you think
people are mad?
The electorate is angry?
I think the people are mad because of the taxation that's taking place. I know small business owners are mad at the B&O tax. They would like changes with that to be a net, not a gross, because the service industry, business owner, he runs a rental shop. Construction fell. Rentals for equipment are down, but his taxes are the same based on what he owns, and he's hit hard by that, and he's taking money out of his own pocket. A savings account, which would be saved for his retirement, he's covering costs that he can't recuperate from the public because there's nobody renting equipment. And that's business owners, homeowners, property taxes, they're just taxed. They see no hope. I feel we have to make some big changes and tighten the belt to keep the money from just flooding out there. I mean, you have to cut back. I mean, being unemployed, I cut back. I used to have an $800 gas bill driving to and from work when I was married. Just that was my commute. I would drive 160 miles round trip every day. I mean, and I was living good. But now that's all come undone, so you just tighten up. You just be like, well, I don't need the T-bone. I guess I'll go with carne asada. So that's what I think people are mad at.
Do you have a question? I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, first of all, my apologies for being late. Secondly, thank you all for stepping up to the plate. Whether I agree or disagree with the way you feel you've got to do things, I do respect your willingness to step up to the plate. My question is to you, Mr. Olsen. I came in and I saw this and I listened to your introduction, and you're putting a lot of faith in your ability to govern based on your experience in the Coast Guard, and obviously it's a structure in which you certainly thrived and did well at. My question is to you is, this top-down command structure you dealt with here, how do you propose to translate that into a governing structure in Olympia where, as Mrs. Rolfes says, it was difficult to get a 50+1 vote?
It's a very efficient command type system you worked with, and obviously, again, you did well at it. But when you get to Olympia, you've got to talk to all your other fellow representatives and get them to go along with you, and it's a very different environment. How is that going to work for you?
Yeah, I hear you, and that's a perceptive point on your part. I did make a bit of just providing these commendation medals just to show some of the things that I did. And yes, the organization of the Coast Guard is different than an Olympia. However, the Coast Guard was dealing with a lot of other agencies where they were not the big dog. They were one of other agencies with the oil companies. I was been oil spills, incident commanders at oil spills, where it was one of collegiality and horse trading, and not who was the big dog, because the Coast Guard was no bigger of a dog than they were. I've had to deal with the Navy, and again, interpersonal ones between that. But in addition to that, I've also been, since 1976, in the property management, investment, rental business, dealing with every day having to live at the bottom line of pleasing customers, dealing with tradesmen, dealing with the city, dealing with the state, trying to deal with the Seattle Housing Authority to provide affordable housing. So I have very good people skills. I'm very passionate about the issue about balancing the budget, but I certainly can work across the aisle and I can work with anybody as long as we're going in the right direction.
To ask you guys the same question in a similar way, give us an example from your professional life of kind of how James says he had learned something on how to get along and how to build consensus and how to get things done. Give us an example of how you've done that in Aaron. Same question.
Well, I guess I'll start by saying that the question about voter anger threw me off, and it actually comes back, it's kind of tied into the question that you just posed. And that question is a really good one, and it's really valid. And what I have always tried to do is not channel anger, whether it's my own or other people's. I can take it. I appreciate that I'm elected, and so I'm a target, and I get it. And I accept that as part of my job, and I listen to it and try to address it as it comes up each time. And I think that's a key component of being able to work with people, not just across the aisle, because quite frankly, some of the Democrats are harder to work with than some of the Republicans. There's just a way of being that allows you to be more open to people, and I try to achieve that with my job, which may sound sort of corny, but it's not really about your party or about your experience. In a lot of cases, it's about whether you really like the job and whether you like people and you like listening to other people.
Okay. When I was a foreman for Asplin and acting foreman on the other job, when the foreman wasn't around, we were put in dangerous situations at all times, and we worked efficiently in those situations. We would always try to complete the jobs on time and under budget or ahead of schedule. We would do our best to do that. We would training the apprentices, we're told to give them tough love at the beginning. You got the new guy on the crew, you got to make them work for it. And then if they show some, you got to give people tough love. Americans are resilient. They'll bounce back. If they, like myself, if I don't have a job here in the next couple months, hey, I'll be surprised. I can go have a job. It's just the people in America. What made us great is that we were able to do what we needed to do to get it done. And now, with government growing, we don't have that option to do what we need to do to get it done. We get told what we can and cannot do, basically. We still have some freedoms, but we don't have leniency. I mean, it just seems like we can do more to benefit the people. and we're not. We're tying their hands. You have to cut them loose and let them go to grow.
Thanks, we're about at our time. I'll echo what Louis said, that we thank you so much for coming in to speak with us. Wish you all good luck in the campaign, and we may have two of you back later.
You will
on
have
the
two of
phone.
us.
Yes.
If they want
we
to.
do our best. It's a time issue, and we do our best to get you guys back around for a second time, because then we'll know more of the issues, and hopefully some things have settled, and you've got more thoughts in your head at that time. So we do appreciate the time. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's very
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, just a question. Is this copyright?